all-day sitting March 24th. This week and next week will be, we'll stay with the Four Divine Abodes or the Four Immeasurables or the Brahma Viharas. I won't be here next Thursday, and Marianne is going to teach us a beautiful, the Metta Sutta, the Metta prayer in Pali cadence. And I actually don't know what country it's from, but it's has more of like the Pali refuges that we do. So I'm really, you all learn it, and then I'll come back, and then you all can teach it to me, and we'll figure out how to do it. And then the week after that, this Friday, tomorrow, is actually the International Day to celebrate Mahavajapati, who was, Buddha's mother died. We'll note that Buddha's mother died, that death does figure into a lot of these stories. I mean, death always does. Can't get around it. And she raised him, she was his aunt, his mother's sister, and she became a teacher and the first teacher in our lineage in her own right. So it's celebrated internationally this Friday. I don't know if this is a new I mean, she's always been around, but maybe people finally notice she's around. I'm sorry, that's just me being cynical. But I'm really glad it's happening. But what we're going to do is the Thursday, I think the 21st, is when we normally do service, and we're going to do, Paula Arai taught us, Shelley was there, Paula Arai taught us as part of the SCBA Celebrating Women series, which I'm going to keep really encouraging. All the first three have all been amazing in very different ways. Paula Arai, who's a deep woman practitioner and scholar, created a ceremony called Homage to Our Buddhist Mothers. And it traces from Mahavajapati through all the lineages. So that's what we're going to do. And I thought then we would spend a little time maybe before that, because we never talk here about lineage, either the traditional one or the women's lineage. If you go to Tassajara, that's part of what they do in services. They chant the they chant the, I still can't think of the name of what they call the traditional lineage, but it's on the Kechimiyaku. If you do Jukai, it's very much part of our lineage, and more recently there's been a creation of a woman's ancestor document, which is also given in Jukai. So I thought we'd spend a little bit of time just talking about that, not a lot, but just enough to note that it's important and it's part of this lineage, and it doesn't matter. I mean, you can love that stuff, you can hate that stuff, it's just anyway, we'll do that. And then starting in April, we're gonna, because we're Zen and we're Buddhists, we're gonna talk about death. Because Buddhists love talking about it. I'm sorry, maybe you don't, but I've always been like, what is that? Ever since I was little, and the fact that this tradition like doesn't turn away from it is like, woohoo! Finally, we can. I mean, I have no idea. I feel very, very humble, but we'll spend a little bit of time looking at it from the point of view of our tradition and what's taught, and birth, death. And I'm also going to be calling forward some Sangha members who have experienced directly or through personal losses or through their work practice, or so that's kind of that takes us up to the beginning of May, and by then we'll all be enlightened, so don't worry about it. You already are, just a little confused, that's all. So what I want to do today, I can never remember what I said on Tuesdays and what I said on Thursdays, because to me it's all just kind of one conversation, but I know for some of you are here on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I do my best to create some sense of continuity depending on when you drop in. And I may have talked about that I was going to talk about Nanchuan and the cat on a Tuesday. Was it on a Tuesday? It's not here. People are shaking their heads. Well, sorry, you guys get it, because that's how it landed. And as part of the Brahma Viharas, this is, you may wonder, Nanchuan and the cat is a Zen koan. Zen koans, the Brahma Viharas, love, compassion, joy, equanimity. And Nanchuan and the cat talks about cutting a cat in two. It's kind of a Zen way of talking about these things, which I think is really important to create bridges. This koan is, as I confessed, it must have been on a Tuesday, is one of the reasons I, quote, left Zen. I was not going to be part of any tradition that even in whatever way talked about cutting a cat in two. I did not think this was where I wanted to land. Now you all must know me well enough that all the things that I go kicking and screaming about, now I love this koan. And maybe you all have little parts of you that go forward and go backward and then kind of look again, and then, so anyway, that's why I want to do this. And I still, please, I mean, cutting a cat into it, but this is important, because that's what we're doing all the time. Okay, so, I'm going to start again with Ayakema, a wonderful Theravadan woman, nun, teacher. And I've said her words before, but I'm just going to say them again because I really deeply trust her wisdom, and she has wonderful books, and I think she's done us all. She was German, so she was Western, but she so devoted to practice. She brought it forward for all of us and established monasteries for women all over the world. Okay, here we go again. We can be whole only with a heart united in love. True love exists when the heart is so broadly trained that it can embrace all human beings and all living creatures. Let's note it says trained. That's what we're doing, is we are training our hearts to embrace all human beings and all living creatures. This requires a learning process that is sometimes hard. Above all, when someone turns out to be very unfriendly or unpleasant. But this condition can be reached by everyone because we all have the capacity for love within us. The more often we remember that all our heart has to do is love, the easier it will be to distance ourselves from judgments and condemnations. But that doesn't mean that we no longer distinguish between good and evil. Naturally, we know what is evil. Evil is a traditional word that Theravadins use. I used to think it was overblown, but you know what? I think there's evil. So Brother David, somebody said, what's evil? I mean, in the Christian tradition, what's evil? And what did he say? He said something like, you just turn away, you just keep turning away from the light and love and the world so much that it just gets darker and darker and darker. It's not because anybody's an evil person. It's just, let's just acknowledge things happen in the world that look pretty evil to me. But hatred of evil needn't forever be stirring in our hearts. On the contrary, we have compassion for those who act in a way that does harm. I think it might be, and probably is pretty obvious. I hope that one of the reasons I'm bringing all this forward right now is the times we're in, and I think probably it's just going to get more divided and more nasty. And so we need to, as practitioners, keep affirming who we are and how we're going to be in this, not turn away, but how to be with it. Most of our problems are concerned with interpersonal relations. So there you go, she brings it back to the personal. To address these, we can direct our view to the teachings on the four highest emotions, the Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes: loving kindness, or love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. If we practice these, life can become like paradise on earth. Whenever somebody else says or does something, it's a matter of his or her karma alone. Only a negative reaction on our side creates our own karma. So there's choice. That's what we're training in. There's choice moment after moment. And of course, we're going to learn by falling down. This isn't about being perfect. This is about noticing. Then taking a breath, coming back, reaffirming, which means don't know, which means really don't know what's needed here right now. Because this situation, if you try to put something on top of it, like, oh, I'll just be loving all the time, I mean, that's a really nice idea. But if you keep trying to paste love on top of a lot of hatred or anger or fear, or that's not it either. But keep trying it out. You know, we're practicing, we're training. So the only thing that matters is to incline one's own heart to love, because the person who loves is by nature lovable too. But we love for the sake of love, and so we succeed in filling our hearts with love, and the fuller it gets, the less room there is for the negative. If we observe ourselves very carefully, Dogen says, study the self. Study this particular self. It's all you got. And the more you understand this self, you will understand all selves, because Buddha really, I think, had it down. Greed, hate, and delusion. It's kind of amazing to me how simple it is, and we're all playing it out in 100 million different ways. Study it, not with judgment, not with condemnation, but just wanting to understand it so that we can wake up in it, so that these, the Tibetans call them kleshas, or poisons, become our compost. In Tibetan ceremonies, rituals, tantric rituals, you eat all the poisons. They pass around trays with chocolate and alcohol and meat and, you know, little bits of everything that you would traditionally think, oh, monastics don't do that. It's actually, it's part of the ritual that you take them, and in ritual form they're transformed. So that's what we're doing. Is please have a piece of chocolate. I mean, I love chocolate. So anyway, I think you get that. We have to act like every mother. Well, not every mother, but we hope, with motherly mind. Dogen talks about parental mind, grandmotherly mind. She loves her children even though they sometimes behave very badly. We can make this sort of approach our goal and recognize it as our way of practice. Okay, you ready for the Zen? One Zen, I mean, we've got the paramitas, we've got bodhisattva vows, we've got lots of in Zen, lots of really lovely ways to talk about it. But then there's also, it's like, don't get caught up. Don't get caught up in all this lovely stuff. It's like, this is real life. Pay attention. So, there are monks in the East Wing and the West Wing, and they're arguing about a cat. They're in a monastery. In most monasteries in ancient China, the community was divided, and, I mean, I don't know this, but I've read this. So on one side were the monastics, the meditating monks. I've been in monasteries. This feels so, I mean, I was at Green Gulch Farm, and there was so much tension between the monastics and the gardeners. Because gardeners have to respond to the schedule of the earth. And monastics is, no, I'm sorry, there's this Zazen schedule. And it was always like, so, anyway, I think you could maybe get it. Is how are we going to do this? How are we going to work it out? So in this situation, Ancient China, it was the monastics on one side sitting in their perfect monastic schedule, which is really beautiful and really important. And on the other side were the workers, the monks who were doing the kitchen and who were, well, it says here, cooking, farming, fixing, chopping firewood, and so on. Same thing. There was also, I was talking to somebody just the other day about having lived in a monastery, and I think it still goes on, the tension between families and monastics who are following a monastic schedule. It was there when I was there, and I think it's still there. You know, it's like, here's the schedule, you do the schedule. Yeah, well, what about my kid? I have to get my kid off to school. I have to, so there's nothing here that isn't still happening in this world, but it's also happening inside of ourselves, right? And it's also, I mean, it's happening in the world all the time. We're setting one thing up against the other. Okay. It says here, as soon as there were two halls and two functions, there were different viewpoints, and inevitably there were disputes over which viewpoint was correct. Anybody who thinks you're going to go into a monastery and the whole world isn't going to come with you, sorry. And monasteries are, maybe I'll send it out. Chimio Atkinson did a talk as part of the SCBA Celebrating Women series, and she spent time in the same monastery, a woman's monastery in Japan that Paula Arai trained in. And it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful depiction of monastic life. It's really important. If you're, I mean, I feel so lucky that I did this in my 20s and early 30s, you know, and monastic life isn't easy, but even if you just have time to go down to Tassajara for, you know, just to, anyway, it's, longer retreats are really important. Okay, so here's the story. Nanchuan, this is a story about Nanchuan and Zhaozhou, who were two Zen masters who practiced close to each other and had a really close relationship. So you can feel in this, there's a kind of repartee that's happening between them. They're enacting something. Nanchuan saw the monks of the eastern and western halls fighting over a cat. Maybe I read a commentary. Maybe the workers thought like the cat could be a good mouser. You know, like cats are very functional that way. But for the monastics, because you get very sensitive, it's like, how could that even be? I remember, I'm sorry, I won't go on, but I remember being at Green Gulch Farm, and Alan Chadwick was there, who was this master gardener. And there was always a problem. I mean, there were gophers, there were birds eating the seedlings, and Alan Chadwick was just like, he had nothing to do with the monastics. It's like, you guys are doing this. He was so single-sighted about what he did. And we would get up after we sat, and we would go down and work in the garden, which was wonderful. One of my, I would love it. We would harvest, but in this particular morning, Alan Chadwick had caught a whole bunch of birds in traps and hung them upside down along the fence dead by their little feet, because it was to scare away other birds. See, you're doing it too. I mean, for him, as a gardener, it was just like, I mean, I remember whole meetings talking about, what do you do about gophers? I mean, really heated community meetings about gophers. I mean, excuse me, if you're a gardener, there are gophers, and birds eat up all the little seedlings. What are you going to do? So the monastics were like, ah! The gardeners were, it just wiped out whole rows of seedlings. I think soon after that, Alan Chadwick was asked to go. He wasn't quite getting. Anyway, I'm making all of this relevant. So, Nanchuan sees the monks of the eastern and western halls fighting over a cat, and seizing the cat, takes the cat. He told the monks, if any of you can say a word of Zen, you will save the cat. I like the interpret. If any of you can say a true word, you're going to save this cat. So he's hanging this cat, this alive being, right between these 2 points of view, and saying, you have to say something true in this moment to save this cat, which is essentially get over yourselves. How can you speak someplace deep and true that's not going to create more division? No one answered. And it says in this one, Nanchuan caught the cat in two, although later commentaries say he didn't really do that. But it's like, that was why I was out of there. That evening, Zhaozhou returned to the monastery, and Nanchuan told him what had happened. Zhaozhou removed his sandals and placed them. That evening, Zhaozhou returned to the monastery, and Nanchuan told him what had happened. Zhaozhou removed his sandals, placed them on his head, and walked out. And Nanchuan said, if you had been there, you would have saved the cat. What we don't know, because we don't know ancient China, is that when you put your sandals on top of your head, it's a sign of mourning. It's a sign of grief. It's like if you can't feel the grief of this situation, if you can't feel the grief of what's happening in our bodies and minds when we do this, if we can't feel the grief of what's happening in this situation and in the country and the world, we're just going to keep cutting it in two. You have to be able to access that level.
Diane's putting a shoe in it.
Putting a shoe in. Oh, there we go. There's a wise person of Zen. Yeah, maybe we should all just we'll practice keening with our shoes on our heads. Dogen said, if I were Nanchuan and the monks could not answer, I would say, too bad you cannot answer, and then I would release the cat. So Dogen always would take, I mean, these traditional koans that's the great thing about Dogen, is these koans were pre-Dogen, and they were all pretty prescribed, and there were right answers, and there were commentaries that happened down over time, and Dogen wouldn't buy into any of that. He would always keep turning it, because of course once you think you have a right answer to anything, then you're just as stuck as you were originally. So his commentary was, he just released the cat. Let it go. Here's a commentary I found by Norman Fisher. Just so it's not just Zen, it's also in Christianity, another one of those stories that you go, oh my goodness. We could compare it to a similar story that appears in the Bible involving the wise King Solomon and a baby. You know this story? As the tale goes, two women are arguing over a baby, both claiming to be the mother. Like Nanchuan, Solomon proposes to solve the dispute by cutting the baby in two. He intends to give half to each woman. It's a fair solution. And of course, what happens is it calls out the real mother, because the real mother speaks up immediately and says, no, don't do that. I'm not the mother. Give the child to the other person. I mean, she'd do anything to save the child. And so Solomon discovers that she's the real mother and the one who cares the most for the child's welfare. So how do we keep practicing coming back to love and compassion and joy and equanimity, moment after moment, recognizing that we are all cutting the world in two because that's the way we perceive. I mean, it's just, we're hardwired. And that's why we train. I mean, Zazen is you just sit down in the middle of it all. You just sit down in the middle of it all, and all comes and blah, 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 blah. I like it, I don't like it, get me out of here. I mean, I don't know, you probably had 100 million different moments that happened while you were sitting here for half an hour. and you don't negate it, you don't override it, you just sit in the middle of it. And you wake up in the wonder and the mystery and the oh my goodnessness of it all. So that more and more we do, and I think it is what happens, is there is a zazen body, heart, mind that this little self more and more can just settle into. And we can just say, oh, there you are again. Or, oh my goodness, look at you just made the same old mess again. But there's this bigger mother Mahapajapati ancestral lineage isness body out of which maybe a true word can arise, and maybe we can find something appropriate to say to save the moment and to save the world. And I sure don't know what it is. And if you think you know what it is, that's nice, but probably it's just an idea that it needs to arise in the moment. But that's why we train, to bring the world that we all know and hope is possible forward. So, a true word. What is a true word? I love that. What is a true word? What is an authentic word? What is an appropriate response? Maybe I'll just do this part quickly because I want us to have time to talk to. The precepts. First precept is do not kill. And the balance of it is nurture life. So in the precepts, there's 3 levels. The first one is the literal. Do not kill. Try not to kill. Second level is compassionate. Is that there may be situations, it's complex, where maybe you do have to kill something to allow something else to live. I mean, we're killing things to eat. There's just each situation, if you try to do black and white thinking, then you're going to miss what's a compassionate response. And the third level is the ultimate level, which recognizes that on the deepest level, I have another story about horses that I think I want to tell on next Tuesday. And the Dharmakaya body, everything is flashing and arising, and we're interpreting and tangling it and weaving it, but in the deepest sense there is no right or wrong. It's beyond right or wrong. It's just is. It's just love. It's just everything's a manifestation of something so big and vast and unknowable that to try to call it this or that in any way already makes it small. So we little human beings are trying to find our way in the midst of all of this. Don't kill. But what's this situation call for? What's a true word? What's an appropriate response? And if we sit in the ground that everything is empty of any inherent self-existence, it completely frees us to see with fresh eyes and with creativity and with to bring forward over and over again in the world that which is beyond our imagining. And it arises. I think we've all had the experience where I don't know what to say, and then something comes out of my mouth and I think, where did that come from? Or I do something that feels kind when I wasn't feeling kind at all. But something in me responded. Okay, so we go back to Ayakema. We have to act like parental mind, grandmotherly mind. What is it? Loving her children even though they sometimes behave badly. Loving ourselves even though we're all just a little, we've got more than one misbehaving, rebellious child in here. If we can do that, then more and more we can find deep mind, deep way. Okay, so let's just break into 15 minutes What's a true word? What's that mean to you? What's a true word? And maybe each person, why don't you just each person take 2 or 3 minutes and just like, a true word is, and then second person, third person, and then you'll